Shri Arun Kumar Mishra, IAS, Additional Commissioner, Department of Commercial Taxes, Government of Bihar, to please come to the dais and conduct the session. May also request Dr. Sacchidananda Mukherjee, Associate Professor, NIPFP, so kindly come to the dais. I now request Shri Mishra ji to kindly introduce the speaker and conduct the session. Thank you.
Distinguished guests and luminaries such as Dr. Rao and Dr. Raz and all the others. First of all, I'm not an economist, so I'm almost entirely out of place here. But this is a session on GST, which I've been doing for the last 10 years maybe, and which I've been taught by Dr. Rao and even Dr. Mukherjee. Dr. Mukherjee has done some pioneering work in trying to assess the size of the informal economy in the country, which is a very difficult task. But of late, he has been doing a lot of work on GST and doing a lot of writing on GST. So he's aware of how, or he's up to date with how things have gone under GST. So now I'll hand over to him.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Adri, for inviting me. And thank you very much to all of you for keeping your patience to listen to us. And this is one paper that we have just completed and is a co-authored paper with Dr. Kavita Rao. So this is the structure of my presentation. As Professor Dasgupta yesterday mentioned, that at present we have just passed the 5 quarters of introduction of GST. It's not right time to do an elaborate exercise on GST, but this is a first kind of what kind of things are going on for the last 5 quarters. I've tried to assess that thing in line with some of the papers that, international papers that are put up in Treasury, Australian government. So first I will like to address the issues related to what is the impact of GST on economy, mostly on our growth and mostly demand side and the sectoral aspect of growth, inflation and tax administration, tax compliance, and also some issues related to state and union finances, mainly the revenue side, how it has impacted. It's a very preliminary analysis, and I hope that these kind of findings, that whatever I have found in this paper may not stay, and I like to see that it should not stay for another, say, another 2 or 3 quarters, or another, say, by in the next year, the scenario will completely change. With that note, I want to start. So first of all, the international experience says that, and the experience is that immediately after introduction of GST, the GDP growth falls for 2 to 3 quarters, and after that it picks up. And the second thing is that inflation also goes up, and after that it goes down. I'm not going to details in the why it is happened, because the thing is that when the GST is introduced, and most of the countries, if you see, GST is introduced in a high growth scenario when the growth rate is very high. But we introduced the GST in a very low growth scenario. So from that angle, that Indian GST and the other countries' GST is different, and Indian GST is completely unique because the federal structure, even the Australia and other countries they have, we have double tax administration, and is a destination based, is a harmonized kind of system, and for several features of the GST is unique, and that I have written in one of the papers why it is unique. And second thing on inflation, because there will be so much of price correction, supply chains management, and the logistics aspect, and for that the price changes happen, and within 1 or 2 or 3 quarters the price stabilizes and there will be less volatility in the price case. And The third thing is that I want to mention that the GST and the other kind of complexities that we have bought for after the GST revenue neutral rate estimation, whatever happened, the setting of the tax rates, administration side, compliance issues, that is beyond the control of any kind of policy academician like us. It was totally taken over by someone else, and I don't want to comment on that. So with that, I want to introduce that what was the experience of Australia. Australia introduced the GST in July 2000, and it is not only the GST, they introduced a package of reforms with the indirect with direct taxes also. They cut the personal income tax, and they gave several other provisions so that the impact of GST will be moderated, so that they could have a level playing field with the direct and indirect taxes. So within 2 or 3 quarters, they picked up. So if you see that the next quarter, they had a huge shortfall, then they picked up, and the picking up of the Australian GST and the GDP growth was mainly contributed by the Sydney Olympic. If you remember, there's a huge construction of capital investment, and that thing that helped a lot. Apart from that, the direct tax kind of incentives they give. So with that, what is happening in the Indian GDP growth scenario? If you see, before the GST is introduced, we had demonetization or notebandi, and that has happened in the November of 2016. And beyond that, it's happened around the fourth quarter of 2015-16, the growth was slowing down. And when the GST is introduced in the first quarter of 2017-18, the growth rate was 5.6%, then it's picked up. So at latest data that I have from the UPWRF, and growth is around 8% kind of thing. So we could say that whatever the distortion happened before the introduction of notebandi and after the notebandi, that has been somehow we managed through the GST introduction. It didn't cause much distortion till now, but what is going to happen in future, I don't know. So with that note, I want to look into the most of the demand side. So it's that what are the factors that influencing this GDP growth. So first thing comes the private final consumption expenditure, because that constitute almost 56% of our total thing. And if we consider that since GST is a consumption-based tax, and mostly the people are consuming, so what happened to the private final consumption expenditure? So if we see that after GST is introduced, it was almost flat for 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, it picked up. So we are hopeful that the green shoots could be seen in the private final consumption expenditure. And what are the reasons for this kind of flatness and then picked up? So, and this pickup is basically very, very preliminary, or we are going to have a very sharp. That is another aspect of that thing. And the two major factors which influence this kind of thing is, one is of course, the petroleum products, the diesel and petrol prices picked up, and it picked up for last of course, 8 quarters or 9 quarters, even last 3-4 years it is picking up. And it is picking up, the prices is gone up much more for the diesel as compared to petrol, which influence our diesel car sales. If you see the car sales data, the most of the big ticket item that the GST will come from, 28% tax rate on the cars, the car sales of the diesels have fallen down because the price difference between the petrol and diesel is going very down. And the second thing is I want to mention is that the car sales for the long time is not picking up. So we are hopeful that in the next December end, and we will have huge kind of incentives for the consumers to purchase cars, because we are also talking about the slowly going to the electric vehicles. So most of the people, those who want to take the polluting vehicles, they will purchase the cars in December or January kind of thing. With that, and I want to go to the second part of the gross fixed capital formation, that is the investment, that is the engine of growth for future growth of our economy. So if we see that after the GST is introduced, it picked up, the gross fixed capital formation investment picked up, then it fall in the first quarter of 2018-19. So reason for this kind of quote that most of the cases of what happened, the long time there is a shortfall in the investment, private, the kind of government as well as private investment. Private investment was very slow because they are not certain what is going to happen in the GST, and that thing they are holding for not to have large kind of investment. And second thing, government investment was slowing down because of different reasons. And then the government investment also picked up in that sense. So, but it fall down. So my hope is that if the investment is going down in the first quarter of 2018-19 and this trend continues for another 2-3 quarters, we will going to have very bad time in terms of growth impetus for our GDP growth. And the third thing that I want to comment on, government final consumption expenditure is not picking up. Government final consumption expenditure is also not picking up, and it's not a very weak percentage, but it is one of the major item in our GDP growth influence. And if it doesn't pick up, and we are hopeful that if the Ayushman Bharat is introduced in the this year, or even that kind of thing, there will be some kind of government final consumption expenditure. I don't know. I was just listening to Ayushman Bharat and other things. I thought that I'll also pick some words about Ayushman Bharat. But that there's no, I don't see any government big ticket item is coming in government final consumption expenditure in the next couple of quarters. The third thing is basically is the export. Export is almost flat for the last 3 quarters. Then it picked up in 2018-19. It may be that the petroleum prices picked up and that's why it is picking up. But the thing is that export is zero rated. So we are not going to get any tax revenue from the export. But the thing is that if export goes up, our employment goes up, our income goes up, and people will consume. So there's a possibility of the consumption growth, and through that we will get the GST revenue. And the import, we are going to have import is flat for the last 3-4 quarters. So the IGST part from the import side, we don't get too much of revenue from expectation from that thing. So with that scenario, I could say that that scenario is very early scenarios are not very bad. And there are possibility that GDP growth will pick up over the years. And since this is the next, we are going to have an election year, there will be lots of expenditure, and there is a possibility of GDP growth will pick up for the next year. And inflation will be also moderated because it's an election year is coming. So with that note, I want to just point it out, there's another part of gross capital formation, that is the change in stock. So if we plot the change in stock over the years, we'll see there's a huge fall in the change in stock. And this has happened before the GST is introduced. So we know that whenever someone is holding the stock, that is also holding the tax. Because tax is only credited when you sales, when your sales liability arises, you adjust with your input tax credit. So this fall in the stock, that means there's a, basically the stock of input tax credit that government used to get, that has gone down. So there's a possibility of level adjustment in the GST revenue, and that revenue will be around 5,000 to 6,000 crore, and that is the thing. And what is the possibility of kind of why this has happened? There are several reasons for that stock adjustment, but if you see in the market, so one thing happened because that IGST rate and the CST rate. CST rate was 2%, IGST rate is around 18%, 12%, whatever the good attracts. So this is a huge tax blocking, basically the cash flow blocking if you store lots of your goods into your inventory. So there's a possibility that people don't want to stock goods, and that's why the market is having low new normal level of stock holding. So with that, I just want to conclude that this part, that the manufacturing, if we come to the the sectoral aspect on that thing, manufacturing growth is picking up. There's a good sign. The afterfall in the manufacturing growth before introduction of GST, and that is quite normal that manufacturing growth will be very low before the introduction of GST, because people are not certain that what kind of tax rate is going to happen and what kind of input tax credit they will get, what will be the compliance and that thing. So there's lots of uncertainties when the GST is introduced. And after that, the manufacturing growth is picking up. Then also, the one thing that I want to mention that Sir can throw some lights to me, because the earlier what used to happen, that lots of value addition used to happen beyond manufacturing, because manufacturing used to attract both central excise as well as state tax, sales tax and VAT, whatever. But so lots of value addition, mainly in the paint sector, for the chemical sector, lots of value addition used to happen beyond the manufacturing level, trade sector. And maybe those are consolidating into the manufacturing sector. So if we see that the manufacturing growth is picking up, but the trade sector growth is not picking up. So and the trade, not only the trade is the major component of our service sector. So trade is not doing well as per as the data. So that is quite problematic. Why it is happening, I don't know. And that is to be explained in greater details. And other factor is basically agriculture sector is growing well. There's a possibility is that agriculture sector doesn't attract any taxes, even the purchase, food grain purchase tax and other tax are done, but that holds lots of input tax credit. Fertilizer, pesticides, and all these things attract the taxes. And if the agriculture sector goes up, then of course your tax collection will go up. And the second thing is that agriculture sector improves, that means your demand for consumption good will improve over the years. And the last thing is that I want to mention that what is happened to Indian construction sector after GST introduced. Indian construction sector is going through very bad time before introduction of GST, but after introduction of GST there's improvement, and after that in the first quarter of 2018-19 there's a fall. So there are reasons for that kind of thing. So one thing happened is that real estate sector for the last 2-3 years not doing well. So what construction sector is happening mostly in the government sector and the big road construction and other kind of activities, not in the private household sector construction activities. So, inflation. This is a good thing that Indian GST is not inflationary. We can say by for the last 5 quarters data is not inflationary, in the sense that there is a high kind of inflation rate is moderated, is not very inflationary. So there are two aspects of that thing. One is that if inflation rate is not high, and if we have 4% target of achieving the inflation, so what level of our real GDP growth is required to meet the 14% growth target that we have given for the state government? Because we have to, the central government have to give the compensation to the state government by 14% growth rate with the base year of 2015-16. And inflation rate is not very high, around 4 to 5%. That means if it is a 10% growth rate is required in our GDP growth. That's the one issue, that what will be the union finances if the inflation rate is not very high. That's the one thing. And even the CPI inflation is not very high. So that is the second thing that I want to say. So in the winding up, I could say that the trends in the growth and inflation in India seem to be somewhat different from the observed tendencies of other international experience. And it didn't, I say that with the experience of the first 5 quarters, that it's not distortionary in that sense, GST, and it has helped somehow to overcome the distortion happened due to the Notebandi. With that, I want to show that how difficult it is to GST system to compliance. So one of the two indicators I have built, three indicators. So one is that the basically is the non-compliance and the late compliance and the compliance, so basically late fee. This is the data I gathered from some website, is RTI data. So if you see that the non-compliance, basically the non-filers have gone up. But this data is to be taken with consideration that over the years, these people, like the last February and January, they will file the return after some time with late fee. And the late fee, basically late compliance has gone down substantially. But the late fee has gone up. So late fee for return submission, because you know we have GSTR 1 submission and GSTR 3V submission every month for the big. And then I don't want to discuss on other details of GST compliance system. So this is the thing is happening. That means 814 rupees every filing of return. So they want to pay the late fee and file the return. That means the compliance system is very costly for some of the registered dealers. The second thing of indicator of that thing, that how cumbersome is the compliance and how difficult the system is, that we have disputes. There are 14 cases that have in the Supreme Court that have escalated to the Supreme Court, and there are almost 118 cases. And this is for only 7 months. This is only up to 16 March 2018. We have 180 cases in the High Courts and 14 cases in the Supreme Court. So that means they are going to have lots of litigation in the GST system. So that is one kind of indicator that the GST system, I don't want to comment that it is a litigation prone or not. So there is the possibility of simplicity of the GST system, and that is to be explored. And another way of avoiding the GST litigation is to have advance ruling. So some states, if we see, they prefer the advance ruling in as compared to going to the litigation. So advance ruling, there are 110 advance ruling up to 8th August 2018 has been issued. And advance ruling is company specific and the issue specific. It is not general. So if I want to go for one product or specific thing, I want to get. It is not across the board that they can apply. So advance ruling is the one way to avoid the litigation, and I hope some states are most prone to advance ruling as compared to go to disputes. Revenue side, I have just compiled. I hope if you could put up some lights, then you can see this table. So this is for 4 states that they have put the data, and this data they put to the joint secretary in the Ministry of Finance every month or every quarterly to get the compensation. This data is available for all the states, but they don't put into the public domain. So some states they put. So if we see how the revenue figure is coming for the 4 states, so if you see the case of Tamil Nadu, they have 8.2% growth in the GST collection. For the case of Odisha, they have negative growth. And Maharashtra, they have 29.5% growth, and Kerala, they have 4.02% growth in the GST collection. So if this revenue trend continues, then it would be a problem. Then I could speculate that what is going to happen after 5 years of GST growth, GST compensation period is over after 5 years. So after this Kerala fire, the Kerala government is asking for 10% additional cess permission. So Tamil Nadu, after Cyclone Gaja, they are asking. So stability of the GST structure and design is in question, because if this continues, and I don't know how 15th Finance Commission will come out with this problem of compensation to the states. Whether this compensation will be extended for another 5 years, whether union government has that much of fiscal pace, if not, how to mitigate this problem. The union finances, if we see, we have put 2 graph. One is without adjustment for IGST, another one with adjustment of IGST. That is 2017-18 corrected. I have allocated the 50% IGST to the state and 50% to the central government. And they have taken entire IGST to the central government. So that's the uncorrected figure of 2017-18. If we see that as compared to 2015-16, 16-17, monthly collection of GST revenue is lower than earlier periods. My is back of the envelope collection estimation shows that ideally it will be around 1,10,000 crore every month to give 14% growth rate to the state government and intact the central government taxes and that thing. But if it is below 1,10,000, there will be deficit. And this year, this month, last month we have 97,000 crore. So you can imagine that how much revenue shortfall we have. So with that, I just want to conclude, and conclusion is put in your folder, some of these things, that I want to just mention that one thing, that GST is evolving. We can't say that how these things will be after 1 or 2 or 3 quarters, or after, say, after 1 year. If the growth rate is good, I think then revenue will come. But there is a possibility of simplicity of the GST system. Rate, I think government is not going to touch the rate for another 1 or 2 years, but there is a process of simplicity, compliance enhancement, compliance, taxpayer services, another thing. With that, I want to conclude. Thank you very much for your patience.
Sir, the jury is still out. The data is insufficient, and there are, there are interpretations possible on the data that is available with us. And what is more, it might look that in order to provide 14% compensation to the states, an assured rate of 14% compensation to the states, the center would need, the total GST collection including cess should be at an average level of around 1,10,000 crore. Against this background, let us consider one thing, that the base year, in the base year, the aggregate value of taxes subsumed, center and states put together, was around 8,40,000 crore. An average of about, average is again a very dangerous idea, but still we would use this. An average of 70,000 crores a month in 15-16 of subsumed taxes. Now it's up to about 95,000, 96,000 crores, which is about an average about 12.5%, 12% per annum. Not bad, considering that we have introduced a tax in which we have had to virtually get 37 players on board. The entire system, this kind of tax, and this is the only dual GST in the world. Every GST, every other GST in any federal structure, I don't need to tell you this, Dr. Rao knows this more than any of us, it's a unitary, essentially unitary in character. We are the only ones who are doing a dual GST.
Brazil and the province of Ontario in Canada also have state central GSTs.
But what the Canadians have done is that they have harmonized that. They have one levy, they have one administration. And let us not talk about the Brazilian levy, because it's not only federal, not only provincial, it's a heady cocktail of federal, provincial and municipal in some cases also. Come again?
You cannot say the Indian tax is unique.
Well, we can discuss it offline. There are other unique features. Without occupying the time of all our distinguished faculty and members here, we can take it up later on. But sir, the jury is still out. We can't say that this sector has been hit badly, that sector has been hit badly. One thing that has come out very clearly is that the compliance level or the compliance expected has gone up. But considering the fact that in the 1 year period after GST introduction, a total number of 377 notifications or orders or circulars were issued, which makes it an average of more than one a day, I don't think we can make any conclusion. Nevertheless, the floor is open.
Sachi, I enjoyed the presentation and I learned a few things. I just want to, not for your reply, I just want to make 2-3 quick comments on some things in your paper. Now, you have used this, what do you call it, late returns filed and penalties thereon as a basis of your estimate for compliance cost. But then you go on to relate, present information on 2 other items, both of which will have a bearing on compliance cost. One is cases filed due to disputes, and second is advance rulings applied for. Advance rulings can have a positive or a negative effect on compliance cost. Okay, so you need to think of a way of combining all 3 statements at least, but your idea of using late fees paid is innovative. The second related point is, and that also relates to your following table on the finances of 4 states, it's heartening to note that 1, you are comparing the pre-GST regime to the post-GST regime, and you've done this for both center in one table, and the states in one table, and the center in a graph. If you could extend this to a short time series, that would permit us to make valid comparisons between what's happening at the center, to central revenues and what's happening to state revenues. Okay, by itself interest. At the moment, even after looking at your table for states and hearing a story about the center IGST revenue reporting, I still have not a clue as to whether post-GST we're doing better or worse in terms of revenue collection and in terms of the compliance cost with the GST. Has that gone up or down? And I was personally yesterday very negative, but I believe it's important to take into account in some way, not captured here, the compliance aspect, compliance with the GST. Thank you.
Dr. Mukherjee, I don't want to sort of be harsh. You have been my colleague. But I'm somewhere lost. The basic principle of analysis that we are supposed to do is association is not causation. Everywhere you are doing some association and then directly or indirectly attributing it to GST. You start with the price change. You start with the GDP. And then you go into sector-wise thing. Things could have changed for a variety of reasons. Before GST, you had the demonetization. And there is a lot of base effect in many of these things because you see, during the devaluation, some of the sectors have actually, were badly hit. And in the first quarter of last, so for this year, we had a 8.2% GDP growth, and that's mainly because of the base year problems, because the low base. Now I want you to, we need to be a little more rigorous if you really want to get into, at least from NIPAP I'd expect that. Association is not causation, and that's not something which I will take. You're talking about GDC, private consumption. Anything could have moved, including the population of cows. I don't know, what you are talking about. Now, as far as compliance is concerned, I think it's too early to say, number one. You also have to say, in fact, the newspaper reported that now compliance is something like doing compliance is a 20,000 crore industry. You know, I mean, people have to go to a chartered accountant willy-nilly. I mean, they have to really give the money. I mean, chartered accountants will have to do it earlier. You know, I'm basically saying, but we don't really have sufficient evidence to conclude anything. That's the point. Now, let us take that GST as a work in progress. And you will have to say what all things that we need to do in order to correct that. What will happen in 5 years? Many things may change. You know, we don't know. And then you do, and then, and then this, even in terms of the numbers, when you are coming to state-wise, IGST allocations, I am told, have been purely on ad hoc basis. I don't think GSTN is still functional in a manner. That's the reason why both exports, you know, even the export in the refunds and then, sort of IGST allocation to state is on the basis of some formula.
Sir, no, sir. Sir, if you allow me to intervene, sir, because I was a part of this process. Actually, the returns that are being filed, the 3B returns that have been summary returns, they have figures which are not validated through other returns. That is one thing. But the issue is that if I file a return and I say that this is the amount of SGST or CGST credit that I have claimed for paying off my IGST liability, then this is the amount that goes to that particular state. It is picked up from the return.
This has to be
one more
reconciled.
thing, sir.
Reconciliation has to be done.
Sir?
Reconciliation has to be done.
Definitely, sir.
So people would have claimed without really
Sir, reconciliation will have to be done on two levels. One is that when I have made a claim in my return, then that has to be validated. Whether I claim to have purchased from him.
That's precisely the reason. That's the precisely reason I said validation has to happen with the GSTN. Obviously, that is the clearinghouse mechanism. The GSTN is still is also a work in progress. And that's precisely the reason. What I'm trying to say is that it's too early for anything to say. And why I am saying this is, you have a situation where Maharashtra it grows on 19%. In Orissa it goes negative. It's you see, we are basically dealing with a few months' data.
No, sir. Sorry, I just want to intervene that this is the final data that is put up in the Orissa and thing, and it is a revenue compensation they want to get. I am not taking any 3 months or 4 months data. I am sorry. And the second thing is that
1 year data is only for only since July. It's only for a few months.
Point taken, sir. One more thing I would like to, food for thought for the likes of you, sir. GST being a consumption-based tax, it was expected that the so-called consumer-driven states like Bihar, Orissa, maybe UP to an extent, and droves of other central Indian states would have gained a lot. They would not have had any need for any compensation. And the ones who really lost out on GST were the ones like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. Sir, what has happened is that Maharashtra is galloping. You've seen this. Tamil Nadu is picking up. The ones who are lagging behind, who fell behind, but they are now also picking up, initially were the states like Bihar, Orissa, the so-called consumer states which were supposed to have benefited out of this. So there are many reasons for this.
No, there are.
Sir, but it is for you to find out, sir.
Assumption itself was wrong because you did not take into account the fact that the service sector is predominantly in the advanced states. I mean, you are giving additional taxation of services to them anyway. But the point is that, you see, I'm not sure that we can have firm conclusions. This is the point that I'm trying to say. And on the basis of this, this will happen, that will happen. I mean, I think it's too early for me to say. And as far as your association is concerned, I think you need to do a little more rigorous work rather than simply saying this has also increased, that has also increased. That's not all.
Udaji, we can talk it over a cup of tea. We are already running late.
So shall I have to answer anything?
So I really thank Dr. Mukherjee for having made an attempt towards trying to associate certain variables to certain elements, and I am sure he'll develop it into a full-blown theory. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for the talk. I request Dr. Sunita Lal to kindly hand over the mementos to the delegates. We also thank Shri Mishra ji for chairing the session and keeping track of time. Thank you, sir.